Hello friends, having completed the balance sheet, let us now learn the profit and loss account statement of a company based on the format prescribed by the Companies Act 2013. So let us have the discussion by my video series 80. The original Schedule 6 of the Companies Act 1956 did not provide for a standard form of P&L account statement for a company. That means there was no prescribed format for a profit and loss account statement of a company. It only contained the contents to be included thereon. It only mentioned about what are the contents that need to be included in the profit and loss account statement. The Schedule 6 of the Companies Act was revised, and the revised schedule prescribed a standard format for profit and loss account, and the same was made effective from the financial year 2011-12. That means the Schedule 6 was revised, and for the first time a format for preparing a profit and loss account statement for a company have been brought in, and it was made effective from the financial year 2011-12. Now the format of P&L accounts and the guidelines furnished in the revised Schedule 6 of the Companies Act have been adopted in the Schedule 3 of the Companies Act 2013. We are aware that a new Companies Act 2013 have been brought in, and the Schedule 6, the revised one, have been now brought in as Schedule 3 in the Companies Act 2013. Now, why this video series 80? Let us understand one, the format of the profit and loss account statement of a company as prescribed in the Companies Act 2013. The various items of the profit and loss account statement of a company as prescribed in the Companies Act 2013. The guidelines furnished in Schedule 3 of the Companies Act with respect to definition of certain terms, notes to the accounts, and disclosures to be made. Let us now move on to understand these things. First, let us understand how the profit and loss account statement format is prescribed in the Companies Act. It also has got 5 columns, the first one being the numbers, second one is the particulars, the third one is the note number, where any user can go to the particular note to find out more about a particular item, and the fourth column shows the figures as at the end of the reporting period, and to compare the figures of the last year, there is a last column which gives us the figures as at the end of the previous reporting period. Now it starts with the revenue from operations, other income. The two together brings in the total revenue. Then it goes to the expenses side, which talks about cost of materials consumed, purchase of stock in trade, changes in inventories of finished goods, work in progress and stock in trade, employee benefit cost, finance cost, depreciation and amortization expenses, other expenses. Then it comes to total expenses. We will go into each and every item separately. Now we have a total revenue, we have the total expenses. If the revenue is greater than the expenses, we have the profit. But there are 2 points, exceptional and extraordinary items. From there we deduct what is called exceptional items. Then profit before extraordinary items, you deduct that extraordinary item, you get profit before tax. Then the tax expenses, we have two taxes. What is a current expense? Deferred tax. Then there is another profit bar loss for the period from continuing operation and profit bar loss from discontinuing operation. We will learn more about the discontinuing operation also later. Tax expenses for the discontinuing operations. Then the profit bar loss from discontinuing operations after tax. Profit bar loss for the period. So here we have certain new items called exceptional items, extraordinary items, discontinuing operations. We will go into each and every one in detail. But the exceptional items, extraordinary items, and the discontinuing operations may happen in, say, 1 out of 10,000 balance sheets. Normally, these things do not find a place in the normal profit and loss account statement prepared by the company. But of course, having prescribed these items in the format for P&L, we need to understand it in detail. In respect of a company other than the finance company, revenue from operations is equal to sale of products plus sale of services plus other operating revenue minus excise duty. Look here, we are talking about one, the revenue from operations. Operations, when we talk about, it is the main activity for which the business is set up. Income from sale of products. This is applicable in two cases. One, a manufacturing unit or a trading unit. Income from sale of services. That is applicable only in cases where the main activity of the unit is providing service. And then other operating revenue. Other operating revenue means any income which is related to the main activity. For example, a company which is set up for producing sugar, a sugar mill. Whenever the sugar mill produces sugar, the molasses is generated. So the molasses gives income to the company. So the income from sale of molasses is another operating revenue. So whenever the main activity happens, the income not only generated from the main activity, from the other operating activity. Say for example, a company which is engaged in machining of parts. Whenever the machining happens, scrap is generated. The scrap of steel is used as a raw material to make steel. So, income from sale of scrap is another operating income for a machining unit. So, similarly, any income which is related to the main income activity, and that activity, when it gives income to the company, we call them as other operating income. So there are other non-operating income. Non-operating income meaning which is not related to the main activity. They are classified as other income. For example, the company keeps a deposit with the bank. It earns interest on that deposit. So interest income. The company makes some investment in the share market and it earns dividend income, or a profit on sale of a security, or any net gain or loss on sale of investments, and other non-operating income. So the income other than from sale of products is classified as other operating income and non-operating income. Other operating income are income related to the core activity. Non-operating income are not related to the core activity. So here the total revenue is equal to revenue from operations plus other income. And revenue from operations include income from sale of products and also income from other operating activity. Now, say for example, let us go into the some notes provided where the revenue from operations is detailed. Sale of products again divided into two: domestic sales and export sales. Sale of scrap materials, that is other operating income, they are added together. From that, excise duty or any taxes is deducted. Why? Because taxes is a pass through the business. It is neither an income nor an expenditure for a business. Now, for example, in the case other income is interest on fixed deposit is reported as other income. These details will be available from the notes given in the profit and loss account statement. Now, sometimes what happens, a company may be engaged not only in the domestic sales but also in the export sales. So, earnings any in foreign currency has to be separately classified as per the profit and loss account prescribed in the Companies Act 2013. It could be one export of goods, which is to be calculated on FOB basis. FOB means free on board. We will explain this FOB later. Second one is any royalty, know-how, professional and consultation fee, which is paid by the company to somebody or earned by the company. Interest and dividend, anything which is received in forex, any other income. It should be separately classified as earning in foreign currency, and it should be given these subheads. Now look here, in earnings in foreign currency, this company has sold some goods abroad. There is exports of goods on FOB basis. The year before last it was 1560, that is 15 crore 60 lakhs, which has now come down to 2 crore 49 lakhs. Now let us understand what is meant by FOB. Free on board contract relieves the seller of responsibility once the goods are shipped. Please remember, whenever I am doing an export, there is an exporter, there is an importer. Who has to do certain activities, who should take the responsibility, who should pay the cost. Whether the seller will pay or the buyer will pay, whether the exporter will pay, whether the importer will pay, that will be decided before the shipment itself. Now, in this case, FOB means after the goods have been loaded, technically past the ship's rail, they are considered to be delivered into the control of the buyer. That means seller's responsibility ceases the moment the goods are brought to the port and delivered there. That means once the goods are loaded, the seller's responsibility ceases. That is why it is called free on board of the ship. The moment that the shipper loads the goods onto the freight carrier, the buyer is responsible for the goods. That is, the seller's job ends the moment the goods are loaded onto the ship. FOB destination means that the buyer assumes the title of goods at the point of destination, meaning the shipper owns the goods while in transit. Now coming back to this one, the profit and loss account shall contain by way of note the following information, namely 1. The value of imports calculated on CIF basis by the company during the financial year in respect of raw materials, components and spare parts, capital goods. That is, it should be calculated on CIF basis. We are now talking about imports. The FOB we talked about, FOB, free on board. The moment the seller or our company keeps the goods on board the ship, his responsibility ceases. Similarly, when the company imports certain raw materials or imports certain components, imports certain spare parts or imports certain capital goods like machinery, the CIF value, that is cost, insurance and freight of that particular item need to be separately mentioned as a note in the profit and loss account statement as prescribed by the Companies Act 2013. The second one is any expenditure in foreign currency during the financial year on account of royalty, know-how, professional and consultancy fee, interest and other matters in case the company had incurred any of such expenditure in foreign currency, they should be separately mentioned. And the third item is C, the total value of all imported raw materials, spare parts and components consumed during the financial year, and the total value of all indigenous raw materials, spare parts and components, and the percentage of each of to the total consumption need to be mentioned. Not only that, whatever may be the goods which are imported, its consumption during a particular financial year also need to be separately mentioned. Now the amount remitted during the year in foreign currencies on account of dividends. It could be possible that there are some investors who are non-resident shareholders. For them, the company may have to pay dividend, and the payment of dividend will be in forex. So the total number of shares held by them on which dividends were due and the year to which the dividends are related should also find a specific mention. This is in respect of payment of dividends in forex to the non-resident shareholders. Now let us look here, the value of import on CIF basis. We have taken the extract from a profit and loss account statement. See, for the year 2016 ending, the company imported raw material worth 4 crore 49 lakhs. The previous year, the same period as on 31/3/15, the import of raw material on CIF basis was 18 crore 4 lakh. Now let us understand what is CIF. Cost, insurance and freight. The responsibilities of the seller include transporting the goods to the nearest port, loading them on a vessel and paying for the insurance and freight. This means that the seller is responsible for risk and insurance cost until the goods reach their point of destination with the buyer. Ownership and liability transfer from the seller to the buyer the moment the goods pass the boat's railing at their port of destination. Here, the seller of the goods assumes the responsibility and meets all costs till such time the goods reach the destination of the buyer. So here the reporting, in our case, the company is importing. So the exporter meets these costs, which should be mentioned on CIF basis. That is, cost, its insurance and its freight has to be indicated whenever goods are imported by the company. Now, in the case of manufacturing companies, one, raw materials should be separately reported under a broad head. Purchases should be reported under a broad head. In the case of trading company, purchases in respect of goods traded in by the company under a separate head. In the case of companies rendering or supplying services, gross income derived from services rendered or supplied under a separate broad head, it should be indicated. See, the cost of materials consumed has to be given in this format. That is, the raw material, what was the opening stock? Now purchases, domestic purchases plus imported purchases, then the closing stock. So opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock will give you what is the amount of raw material consumed during the particular year. Say in 2015, the company consumed goods worth 399.46 crores. The next year, that is on 2016, the cost of material consumed has slightly come down and it was 391.35 crores. The companies are also required to give the change in inventories, that is between the opening and closing stock. Here the opening stock is the stock in process, finished goods, and the closing stock also the value of the stock in process and finished goods are given, and the difference is taken to the profit and loss account. Whenever the closing stock is more than the opening stock, it will be deducted. If the sum total of the opening stock is greater than the closing stock, it will be added to the profit and loss account statement. This will be in respect of only stock in process and finished goods, because the raw material we have already taken into account the opening stock of raw material and closing stock of raw material to determine the raw material consumption. So the change in inventories will be applicable in case of stock in process and the finished goods. Now, additional information to be furnished by way of note. The employees' benefit cost, it is nothing but wages and salaries, but that has to be bifurcated into one, salaries and wages, contribution to provident fund and other funds, expenses on employees' stock option scheme, staff welfare expenses. This is the way in which the employees' benefit expenses has to be differentiated. We know the difference between a salary and wages. Wages is paid to the laborers who are working in the factory, and the salaries is paid to the office staff and the other employees. Now I have taken an extract from a profit and loss account which gives the employees benefit scheme. The salary and incentives were 11.60 crores as on 15 and reduced to 10.66 crores in 2016. Contribution to PF was 41 lakhs on 15 the year, and in 31/3/16 it has increased to 49 lakhs. Contribution to gratuity fund, of course, nothing was there in 2015, and it was 1 lakh in 2016. And staff welfare expense was 6 lakhs as on 31/3/15, and it has come down to 5 lakhs in 31/3/16. Now the next item is the finance cost. Finance cost means interest expenses and other borrowing costs and any gain or loss in the foreign exchange transactions. The finance cost shall be classified as one interest expense, that is the interest paid on borrowings either to the bank or to the NBFCs or to any financial institutions, etc. Other one is the other borrowing cost, which could be examples, brokerage, commission, stamp duty charges and any other related cost. Then discounts which are incurred by an enterprise in relation to arrangement of funds. And C, the applicable net gain or loss on foreign currency transaction and translations. This is how the finance cost has to be classified as prescribed in the Companies Act 2013. Say for example, in this case, the finance cost includes only interest, interest on term loan, interest on unsecured loan and trade deposits, and interest on working capital finance. So naturally, the interest on unsecured loan and trade deposit goes to outsiders, whereas the interest on term loan and the working capital finance is to the bank. Again, 2 years figures are given for better comparison. Now, certain additional information to be furnished by way of note. In case of any income or expenditure which exceeds 1% of the revenue from operations, or if the amount incurred is 1 lakh, whichever is higher. That is, it could be 1% of the revenue from operations or 1 lakh, whichever is higher. If that crosses that limit, the details of such expenditure or income need to be furnished by way of a note. The examples could be interest income, interest expenses, dividend income, net gain or loss on sale of investments, net gain or loss on foreign currency transactions, payment to auditor as an auditor or for taxation matters or for company law matters, for management of services, for any other services or for reimbursement of expenses. In case of companies covered under section 135, the amount of expenditure incurred on corporate social responsibility, details of items of exceptional and extraordinary nature, prior period expenses. Now, certain expenditure incurred on each of the following items has to be separately indicated. One is, other than the raw material, consumption of stores and spares, power and fuel, rent paid, repair to building, repair to machinery, insurance expenses, rates and taxes excluding taxes on income, any other miscellaneous expenses, dividend from subsidiary companies, provisions for losses of subsidiary companies. These expenditure need to be separately indicated in the company's profit and loss account statement as per the Companies Act 2013. So, for example, I have taken an extract of a company who has given separately the figures like power and fuel, repairs on machinery, job work charges, administrative expenses and selling expenses, and loss on sale of fixed assets and the total. So these expenses which are identified separately need to be separately indicated. Now let us move on to two items. One is called exceptional item. Second one is extraordinary items. As I have told you earlier, 1 out of 10,000 cases only we see these two items. But even then, let us understand what exactly is exceptional items. Exceptional items are those related to the regular operations of the company, but are not recurring in nature. It may happen once in a while, but they are related to the main activity of the company. For example, suppose a company sold off some of its machinery. The company is engaged in some manufacturing activity other than machinery. It has got certain machinery which they thought that it is not required. They want to sell it, and they have sold it for 1 crore. So this has led to an income of 1 crore, which is a big sum for a single transaction. This could easily boost the company's profit in that particular quarter or year. However, this is not likely to recur again. So it is counted as an exceptional item. That is, amounts resulting from unusual sale of fixed assets, losses from disasters not commonly insured, example wars, riots, earthquake, etc. Losses from completely writing of an intangible asset such as goodwill or trademarks, abnormal losses on a long-term contract. These are all some examples for exceptional items. Now let us understand what is meant by extraordinary item, in which way, under what circumstances it is different from exceptional item. Extraordinary items are not related to the regular operations of the company. So that is a basic difference between exceptional and the extraordinary. In exceptional items, they are related to the main activity, whereas in extraordinary, it is not related to the main activity. It arises from an event or transaction that are clearly distinct from ordinary business. These items are not expected to recur frequently. So, like in the case of an exceptional item, these also occur only very, very rarely. Say for example, a flood damaging company equipment or loss, a flood damaging company equipment, a loss in production due to labor strike can be considered as an extraordinary item. Sale of an investment in subsidiary and associated company, discontinuance of a business segment. I have different business segment under the same name in the business company. I am discontinuing one segment. So that could be an extraordinary item. Now the question is, why separate disclosures for exceptional or extraordinary items? Why is it that it has to be separately indicated? It is for the benefit of the users. Let us understand that. One of the important objectives of the disclosure of financial performance is to be predictive value. Predictive value refers to the fact that the quality financial information can be used to base predictions, forecasts, and projections on. Financial analysts and investors can use past financial statements to chart performance trends and make predictions about future performance and profitability. So these financial statements are used by people based on the past performance they predict. So unless we indicate these exceptional and extraordinary items which occur once in a while separately, the predictions can go wrong if they include that also in the income or expenditure. So exceptional items not being repetitive in nature do not have a predictive value. So they should not include it because they occur once in a while. Extraordinary items are in any way not a part of the operations of the company and therefore cannot be very nature to be expected to recur. Hence, the objective of a separate disclosure is to let the users take a view on expected future performance of the company without considering the exceptional and extraordinary items. That is why these two items are separately mentioned. Now the last item is discontinuing operations. What is that? The concept of discontinuing operations have been introduced by accounting standard AS 24. The provision of AS 24 requires that the profit or loss accruing to a business entity on account of its termination of a business component, either through demerger or spin-off or by means of a single plan for disposal of the various items of assets and liabilities on a piecemeal basis, must be recorded in the financial statement as a profit or loss from discontinuing operations. Say for example, many companies, after reaching a particular volume of sale, they do demerge those part of the business and sell it off, and they may generate some profit. It could also be possible that a part of the business operations may not be generating the required profit or anticipated profit. They have decided to sell it or spin it off. Such losses or profit which are happening on account of discontinuing operation should also be separately mentioned. So the changes which have happened is they have prescribed a specific format and they have come out with certain guidelines as to what should be additionally furnished by way of a note. They also brought in the profit or loss on account of exceptional item, profit or loss due to extraordinary item, and profit and loss on account of any discontinuing operation shall also be furnished separately. So like this video series 18, we have learned that the format of profit and loss account statement as prescribed in Schedule 3 of the Companies Act 2013. We also learned the disclosures that are required to be made by the company while preparing the profit and loss account statement. Subscribe to this channel to receive intimation on my new videos. Press the like button and share the information with your friends. In my next video series 81, NBA years learning modules in lending, I shall come out with a similar topic on lending. And thank you very much. Thank you.